Claire Dawson stood in front of the mirror, holding the small velvet box in her hands. She opened it slowly, and the dim morning light caught on the delicate gold chain inside. The necklace had belonged to her grandmother, then to her mother, and finally to her. It wasn't flashy, but it carried the weight of family history, something you couldn't buy, no matter how much money you had. Claire had always dreamed of giving it to Emily on her wedding day. She glanced at the clock. She was already running late. Taking a deep breath, she slipped the box into her purse and grabbed her coat. The engagement party was being held at a fancy restaurant downtown. Daniel's parents had arranged everything. Claire had offered to help with the preparations weeks ago, but Emily had politely told her, "Daniel's family is handling it, Mom. Just come and enjoy." That had been the first sign something was different. Emily had always included Claire in everything, birthdays, graduations, even picking out clothes for job interviews. But since getting engaged to Daniel, little gaps had started forming. Phone calls were shorter, visits less frequent, and conversations always seemed to include Daniel's opinion before her own. Claire tried not to take it personally. She's building her own life, she told herself. That's what I raised her for. The restaurant was buzzing when Claire arrived. Soft jazz played over the clinking of glasses, and waiters in crisp uniforms carried trays of champagne. Guests were laughing, hugging, and taking pictures under the string lights. Claire felt slightly out of place in her simple navy blue dress, but she reminded herself that Emily had once said she looked beautiful in it. She spotted Emily across the room, standing next to Daniel. Her daughter's face lit up as she talked to a group of Daniel's relatives, her hand resting on his arm. Emily looked stunning in a cream-colored dress, her hair curled in soft waves. Claire's chest swelled with pride. No matter what, Emily would always be her little girl. Claire made her way through the crowd, smiling and nodding at strangers she didn't know. Daniel noticed her first. "Claire," he said, smiling politely, "so glad you could make it." His tone was warm enough for others to hear, but there was something in his eyes, something cool and assessing, as if he were measuring her. Before she could respond, Daniel's mother, Victoria, stepped forward. She was tall, elegant, and carried herself like she'd been born into money. "Claire," she said, her smile tight, "how lovely to see you. I hope the traffic wasn't too much trouble." "It was fine," Claire replied, keeping her voice steady. She turned to Emily, who was still laughing with her future in-laws. "Emily," Claire called softly. Her daughter turned, her smile fading just a little. "Mom," Emily said, as if surprised to see her. "Hi." Claire reached into her purse and pulled out the small velvet box. "I brought you something," she said gently. "It's something I've been saving for a very long time." Victoria's hand shot out, resting lightly on Emily's arm. "Oh dear, let's put the gifts aside for now," she said smoothly. "We don't want to interrupt the flow of the evening. Everything is being coordinated." Claire blinked, feeling a pang of awkwardness. It's special. I wanted Emily to have it today." Emily glanced at Daniel, then back at her mother. And then, in a voice just loud enough for those nearby to hear, she said the words that would replay in Claire's mind for years to come. "Mom, we've talked about this. Please stay out of our lives. We don't want drama." The words hung in the air like smoke. Conversations around them quieted. Someone at the bar turned to look. Claire felt the heat rise in her face. It wasn't just what Emily said, it was how she said it. Cold. Final. As if she were speaking to a stranger who had overstepped. For a moment, Claire couldn't move. She felt the weight of the box in her hand, the history inside it. This was supposed to be a moment of joy, of passing down a piece of the past to the future. Instead, it was a public dismissal. She could have argued. She could have demanded an explanation, asked why her own daughter would speak to her like that. But something inside her, a quiet, steady part, told her not to. So she smiled. Not a happy smile, but one of acceptance. She placed the velvet box gently on the nearest table, beside a champagne flute, and straightened her shoulders. "I understand," she said softly. Without another word, Claire turned and began walking toward the exit. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if she were leaving more than just a party behind. She didn't look back to see Emily's face, or Daniel's, or anyone else's. She didn't want to know if they were relieved she was leaving. Outside, the night air was cold and sharp. The city lights blurred slightly as her eyes filled, but she didn't let the tears fall. She stood for a moment, breathing in deeply, the sounds of laughter and music spilling faintly from the restaurant doors. She thought about the years she had worked double shifts, the nights she'd come home too tired to eat but still cooked for Emily, the birthdays she'd made special even when money was tight. She thought about the nights Emily had crawled into her bed after a nightmare, and how Claire had promised to always protect her. Now, standing alone on the sidewalk, Claire realized something she had never wanted to admit. Sometimes love wasn't enough to keep people close. She reached into her coat pocket for her keys. But instead of heading toward her house, she walked to the parking garage across the street. Her car was waiting, and so was the small apartment she had quietly prepared months ago, just in case. As she drove away, the image of Emily's face stayed with her. Not the little girl who once held her hand crossing the street, but the grown woman who had just told her, in front of everyone, to stay out of her life. Claire didn't know it yet, but this night would change everything, for both of them. The elevator doors closed and the world went quiet. Claire watched the numbers climb. 2, 3, 4, 5. Her hands were steady on the brass rail, but her chest felt tight, like she was holding her breath underwater. On the 6th floor, the doors slid open to a dim hallway that smelled faintly of lemons and new paint. She pulled her keys from her pocket and walked to the end unit, 6F, the apartment she had rented 3 months ago and told no one about. Inside, everything was simple and neat. A small couch, a wooden table with 2 chairs, a bookshelf with only 3 things on it, a framed photo of Emily at age 8 holding a blue ribbon from a school art fair, a chipped ceramic mug that said, "World's Okayest Boss," and a thin vase with 2 dried lavender stems. The space was quiet in a way her house never was, and for a moment that quiet felt like a blanket. Then it felt like a warning. She hung her coat carefully and placed her purse on the table. The velvet box with the necklace sat inside like a secret. Claire didn't touch it. She walked to the window and looked out at the sleeping city. Somewhere on the other side of it, her daughter was laughing with strangers, smiling for photos, planning a future that didn't include her. She sat at the table and opened the bottom drawer. The folder was there where she had left it, thick, worn at the edges, held together with a wide elastic band. On the tab, in neat block letters, she had written, "Estate and Business." She took a breath, pulled off the band, and flipped it open. Everything was in order because she had made sure of it. Deed to the family home, bought with a lifetime of frugal years and repaired by her own hands. Bank statements. Certificates for the farmland she had sold after her parents passed. The sale that had become the nest egg she guarded like a hawk. And the bakery papers, permits, tax filings, shareholder records, insurance. She ran her fingers over the documents like she was smoothing a child's hair. For years the plan had been simple. When she was gone, or when she simply got too tired to keep going, everything would go to Emily. Not because Emily asked, because a mother plans for her child even when her child is too young to see it happening. That is what mothers do. They build safety nets and hide them under smiles. But tonight made something clear. Emily didn't want the net. She didn't want the hands holding it either. Claire took out a pen, not a fancy one, a basic black ballpoint, and wrote a date at the top of the draft will. The sound of the tip scratching paper felt loud in the small room. She did not let herself think about the restaurant or the velvet box on the table, or the way the room had gone quiet when Emily told her to stay out of their lives. She thought about ink, and lines, and signatures. Her phone buzzed once in her purse. She didn't check it. She turned to the page with the beneficiaries, and under Emily Dawson, she drew a single straight line through the name. Her hand did not shake. On the line below, she wrote, Sophie Lane. A memory rose up, clear and warm. 10 years earlier, a winter morning when the bakery's pipes burst, flooding the kitchen. Claire had been standing in freezing water shoving towels under the door when Sophie showed up in rain boots and an old parka, hair in a messy bun, cheeks pink from the cold. "Tell me where to start," Sophie had said. No questions. No complaints. They had worked until their fingers went numb. They had saved the ovens, saved the flour, saved the day. They had kept the doors open. There were other memories, too. When Claire had the flu and could barely stand, Sophie had closed the bakery early and brought over soup. When a supplier tried to double-charge them, Sophie had stayed late to go through every invoice. When a teenage boy got caught stealing croissants because he hadn't eaten in 2 days, Sophie had quietly packed a bag and told him to come back every morning for day-old bread. Then made sure he left with a warm drink and his head held a little higher. Loyalty is not a feeling. It is a record. Claire wrote Sophie's full legal name, then her address. She flipped to the business transfer, checked the clauses she had spent months preparing with her lawyer, and made a small note at the margin to ask about one final term. Key employee retention. If the bakery ever sold, Sophie would get a share. Not a gift. A reward earned. The phone buzzed again. This time Claire pulled it out. A message from Emily. Did you leave already? No apology. No explanation. Just a question that sounded like a statement. Claire stared at the screen, thumb hovering, then set the phone face down. She couldn't teach her daughter to respect her with a text message. Respect was not asked for. It was drawn like a line and defended quietly. She kept working. She checked account numbers twice. She reviewed the list of the bakery's small lenders and wrote a sticky note to call Morris, the landlord, to discuss transferring the lease. She printed a fresh copy of the letter to her attorney with instructions to file the will officially and expedite any needed witnesses. She placed a spare pen next to it and smiled at the habit. Always set tools for the next step. Around midnight, she made tea and didn't drink it. She sat on the couch, the steam curling up like a soft ghost, and closed her eyes. She remembered Emily at 5 years old, sitting on the back counter swinging her legs while Claire rolled dough. "When I grow up, I'll buy you a big house," Emily had said with her mouth full of chocolate. Claire had laughed and touched the flower to her daughter's nose. "When you grow up," she had answered, "I hope you buy yourself a life that feels like yours." She opened her eyes and stood. The tea had gone cold. She poured it into the sink and washed the cup. The tiny sounds, water, ceramic, the faint whir of the fridge, felt like a prayer. The next morning, Claire was at the lawyer's office when they opened. The receptionist, a young man with kind eyes and a shy smile, handed her a clipboard. "Good morning, Ms. Dawson. Mr. Patel will see you in a moment." Mr. Patel had been her attorney for years, gentle and precise, the kind of person who read every line twice. He came out of his office holding a mug that said, "Trust but verify." "Claire," he said softly, "come in." She sat across from him and placed the folder on the desk. "I want to file the updates," she said. "Today." He looked at her face for a long beat. "Are you sure about the changes?" "Yes." She didn't explain the party. She didn't repeat Emily's words. She wasn't here to talk about pain. She was here to move ink from draft to deed. They went through each page. When he got to the beneficiary section, he paused. "Sophie Lane," he read. "Your manager?" "She's family," Claire said. The words surprised her with how easy they felt. Mr. Patel nodded. "Then we'll ensure this is airtight." They called in 2 staff members to witness signatures. Papers slid forward, backward. Pens clicked. Names became legal. When they finished, Mr. Patel folded his hands. "Do you want me to send a formal notice to Emily?" "No," Claire exhaled, slow and even. "I'll send a letter. Polite, clear. No blame." He nodded again, as if he'd expected that answer. "I'll file everything this afternoon. You'll receive confirmation in the mail." Back outside, the winter light was pale and kind. Claire decided to walk the 4 blocks to the bakery. She hadn't told Sophie about any of this. She wanted to look her in the eyes when she did. Inside the bakery, the air smelled like butter and cinnamon. The morning rush had passed, and sunlight poured across the glass case where rows of croissants sat like small golden moons. Sophie was wiping down a table, humming softly to herself. When she saw Claire, the hum stopped and her face broke into a surprised smile. "Boss," she said, "you're early." "You okay?" "I'm here to talk," Claire replied. "Do you have a minute?" They sat at the corner table, the one near the window with the chipped edge. Sophie's hands were still damp from the cloth, and she tucked them in her apron. "I'm making changes," Claire began. "To the business. To everything, really." She stopped, searching for the simplest words. "You have stood with me for a long time. Through all of it. I am transferring the bakery to you. Not today, not suddenly, but officially, legally. It will be yours." Sophie blinked once. Then again. "Claire, I can't, I don't." "You can," Claire said. "And you will. We'll do it in steps. I'll mentor you through the accounts and suppliers, the ugly parts, the quiet parts. If one day you decide to sell, there's a clause to protect you. If you keep it, there's a clause to protect the staff. You've earned this." Sophie's eyes filled. She shook her head like she was trying to wake from a dream. "Why me?" "Because you never made me feel small," Claire answered. "Not once." They were silent for a while. Then Sophie reached out, not across the table, but around it and hugged her. It was clumsy and honest. In that small, warm corner, the weight in Claire's chest loosened. The bell over the door jingled and broke the moment. A delivery guy came in with flour. Life kept moving, the way it always does. By afternoon, the first calls began. Emily. Then Daniel. Then a number she didn't know, which she guessed was Victoria. Claire let them all go to voicemail. She sat at her apartment table with a thick piece of stationery and wrote in her careful schoolteacher script. Emily, you are my daughter. That will never change. But I believe you when you ask me to keep distance. I won't argue with you in public, and I won't punish you in private. I will simply live the way you asked, apart. I'm changing my will and the business transfer. This is not revenge. This is respect for your wishes and for myself. I hope one day you will see this clearly. Until then, I am always here to talk when you want to speak with kindness. Mom. She read the letter twice. It said exactly what needed saying and nothing more. She placed it in an envelope, wrote Emily's address, and sealed it. Her hand hovered for a second over the corner, like she wanted to add one more sentence. I miss you already, but she didn't. A letter should not ask. It should tell. As the sun fell, she took the elevator down and walked the 3 blocks to the blue mailbox on the corner. She could have dropped it inside and walked away. Instead, she kept walking. She got into her car and drove to Emily's building. The entryway was clean, with a fussy little plant sitting on a tiny table. A security camera watched the door. Claire stood beneath it, letter in hand, and felt a pinch of foolishness, like a teenager with a note for someone who had moved on. She took the stairs to the 2nd floor, ignoring the elevator's soft ding. The hallway smelled faintly of paint here, too. She found Emily's door and stood with the letter and a question. Was she delivering closure or opening a wound? She slid the envelope under the door, slow and careful, so it wouldn't bend. The thin white edge disappeared into the apartment like a quiet breath. On the way back down, she saw her reflection in the window. A woman who had worked for everything she owned, allowing herself to keep what she had earned without apology. It wasn't pride. It was balance. In the car, her phone buzzed with a new message. Unknown number. She opened it. Ms. Dawson, this is Victoria. I heard there may have been a misunderstanding last night. We prefer to handle things within the family now. Please refrain from involving outside parties in Emily and Daniel's future affairs. Thank you. Claire read it once and smiled a little. Polite words, hard edges. She put the phone face down on the seat and started the engine. At home. And she realized she had called the small apartment home, in her head, and didn't hate it. She cooked something simple. Eggs. Toast. She ate at the table and watched the sky turn from white to blue to a soft, bruised purple. She washed the plate, dried it, and set it in the rack. She took the velvet box from her purse and opened it. The necklace lay there, quiet and bright. She stood, walked to the bookshelf, and set the velvet box next to the photo of 8-year-old Emily with her blue ribbon. For a second the two looked like they belonged together, the child and the heirloom. Then Claire stepped back and saw them as they truly were, memory and choice. That night, for the first time in a long time, she slept through without waking. Morning came with a thin slice of light across the floor. Claire made coffee and checked her email. There was a message from Mr. Patel, filed. Confirmations attached. She opened the PDFs, scanned the stamps and signatures, and felt a calm settle over her like a warm shawl. She was about to close the laptop when the screen flashed with an incoming video call. Emily. Claire stared at the name. Her finger hovered, then clicked decline. She typed a short text instead. I left you a letter at your door. Please read it first. I love you. Then she turned off the phone and put it in a drawer. Not to shut Emily out. To give the letter room to do its work. She went to the bakery. She and Sophie walked the line of mixers and ovens. They reviewed the scheduling template, the cleaning checklist, the supplier list. Claire showed Sophie how she negotiated butter prices when the shipment came late in winter. She explained the trick of testing yeast with warm water and a pinch of sugar. She pulled the ledger and pointed to the note she wrote each Sunday night. Cash is air. Protect the breath. Around noon, a man in a suit came in and ordered 2 coffees he didn't plan to drink. He introduced himself as an advisor to the Brooks family. He spoke in careful phrases. He mentioned transitions and appropriate channels. He suggested Claire take a brief hiatus from the bakery to allow emotions to settle. Sophie stood next to Claire, arms crossed, eyes steady, saying nothing. Claire listened without interrupting. When he finished, she answered with the softest words she could use that still meant no. After he left, Sophie let out a breath she'd been holding. They act like they own you. They act like they own everything, Claire said, and went back to slicing bread. By late afternoon, the bakery grew quiet. The staff laughed in the back as they cleaned, and and someone turned on a tiny radio that crackled with old songs. Claire wrote a list in the notebook she kept in her apron pocket. Call Morris. Update insurance. Order more cinnamon. She underlined cinnamon 3 times. It made her smile. When she locked the front door, the street was almost empty. She walked home, the cool air clean in her lungs. On the steps of her building, she paused and looked up at the slice of moon above the roofline. A thought came to her, not sharp, not heavy, just true. She had not lost a daughter. She had kept herself. She opened her door, turned on the lamp, and set her keys in the bowl. The apartment smelled faintly of lavender and toast. She poured a glass of water and carried it to the window. Across the room, on the table, her phone lit up, silent. She let it ring. She watched the city light breathe. After a while, the phone stopped. Then, moments later, a soft sound at her door. The paper hush of an envelope sliding across the floor. Claire turned. The envelope lay there, pale against the dark mat. She crossed the room, picked it up, and read her name in a handwriting she knew better than her own. She opened it with careful hands. Inside was a single line, written in a rush, ink a little smeared like a tear had touched it. Mom, please call me. I read it. I didn't know. Claire stood very still, the letter trembling like a small bird in her hands. She looked toward the drawer where her phone slept. For a long moment she didn't move. Then she folded the note back into the envelope and set it on the table beside the velvet box, between memory and choice. The night was quiet again, but it wasn't empty. It was the kind of quiet that comes right before the door opens. And the next morning it would. The morning after Claire slid the envelope under Emily's door, she didn't expect anything to happen right away. She knew her daughter. Emily would see the letter, maybe set it aside, maybe read it later when Daniel wasn't around. She also knew the Brooks family had a way of filtering what reached Emily's ears and what didn't. But by 8:15 a.m., Claire's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. She glanced at it without picking it up, Emily's name flashing on the screen. No voicemail, just 2 short calls in a row. Then a text. Did you send me something? Claire poured her coffee and didn't reply. She wanted Emily to read the letter before speaking. She wanted her to feel the words, not rush past them in a defensive tone. She carried her mug to the small table and sat down, watching the winter light stretch across the floor. The bakery wouldn't open for another hour, and Sophie had insisted she take the morning off. That left her with nothing to do except wait, and waiting had never been her strength. At 9:02, another call. This time Claire let it go to voicemail. A moment later, the alert chimed, and she played the message on speaker while staring out the window. Her daughter's voice was tighter than usual, like she was forcing calm. Mom, I got your letter. Can you call me? Please. I don't really understand what you mean about everything I have worked for will go to someone who values me. That sounds extreme. Just call me back, okay? Claire set the phone down without answering. She had no intention of explaining over the phone. The letter said everything that mattered, and now it was Emily's turn to think. She looked at the second page of the draft while still sitting in her folder. The ink from the lawyer's stamp was fresh and final. For years, that page had been the invisible promise under every sacrifice she'd made. Now it was proof that promises could change, not out of revenge, but out of survival. By noon, Claire decided to run errands. She took the long route to the market, passing the old neighborhood where she had raised Emily. The maple tree on the corner still stood, though its trunk was thicker, its bark darker. She slowed as she drove past their old house. White siding, blue shutters, the same squeaky swing on the porch. Another family lived there now. She wondered if they knew that the nail in the kitchen doorway still marked Emily's height at ages 6, 9, and 12. When she got back to her apartment, there was an envelope on the doormat. No stamp, just her name in rushed handwriting she knew instantly, Emily's. Inside was a single sheet, folded twice. Mom, I read it. I didn't know you'd been planning to leave me everything. I didn't know about the house, the bakery, the farmland sale. Any of it. Daniel and his parents, they said it was better to keep finances separate, so there's no tension. I thought I was protecting you from arguments. I didn't mean to hurt you. Please, can we talk? Claire sat down, letter in one hand, coffee in the other. She read it twice. The words weren't angry. They were almost confused, as if Emily had just realized she'd been standing in a room with the wrong lighting all along. She thought about calling right then. But she also thought about Daniel's voice in Emily's ear, about Victoria's carefully worded messages. A single conversation wouldn't undo months of quiet influence. If she called now, it might turn into another loop of half-truths and careful omissions. Instead, she picked up her pen and wrote on the back of Emily's note. I believe you didn't know. But now you do. My door is open when you can come alone and speak to me as yourself, not as someone else's echo. She slid the note into a new envelope and drove it over herself, tucking it under Emily's welcome mat. That evening, the bakery was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerators. Sophie was in the office, checking invoices. When Claire walked in, she looked up. You've been gone all day, Sophie said. Everything okay? Claire told her about the letter, the calls, the visit from Daniel's advisor the day before. Sophie listened without interrupting, her pen tapping the desk slowly. They're trying to manage you, Sophie said finally. Like you're a variable in a business plan. Claire nodded. That's exactly what it feels like. And you're not going to let them, Sophie added, not as a question but as a statement. No, Claire said simply. I'm not. They went through the invoices together, and for a while, it was just business as usual. But as Sophie locked up, she turned to Claire and said, You know, people who actually value you don't make you guess about it. The words stayed with Claire as she drove home. The next morning, the doorbell to her apartment rang at 8 a.m. Claire opened the door to find Emily standing there, coat unzipped, hair slightly messy, no makeup. Her eyes were red, as if she hadn't slept much. Mom, she said, her voice trembling. Can I come in? Claire stepped aside without speaking. Emily walked in, looking around like she was seeing the apartment for the first time, which, of course, she was. This is where you've been? Emily asked quietly. Claire nodded. It's peaceful here. Emily sat down at the table, her hands wrapped around the mug of tea Claire set in front of her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. I'm sorry about the party, Emily said finally. I didn't mean for it to sound like I was shutting you out forever. I thought. She stopped, then started again. Daniel's family has this idea of how things should look. No messy emotions. No disagreements in public. I thought I was protecting the night from becoming awkward. But I see now. I was just hurting you. Claire listened, her face calm. Do you know why I didn't argue back that night? Emily shook her head. Because you'd already made your decision, Claire said. Arguing would have been for me, not for you. And I decided in that moment that I wouldn't beg for space in your life. Emily looked down at her tea. I didn't know about the will. About the bakery. I didn't even think. That's the point, Claire said gently. You didn't think. You didn't ask. You just assumed there would always be more time, more chances, more safety nets. But safety nets are made by hand, Emily. They fray if they're never respected. Tears slid down Emily's cheeks, and she didn't wipe them away. Are you going to change it back? Claire's answer was steady. Not today. Maybe not for a long time. Trust doesn't snap back like a rubber band. It's built thread by thread. Emily nodded slowly, as if each word weighed something she had to carry. That night, Claire sat alone with the velvet box in front of her. She opened it, touched the necklace, and thought about giving it to Emily anyway. But she closed the lid and placed it back on the shelf beside the photo. Some gifts had to wait until the person receiving them could understand their weight. She turned off the light and went to bed. In the dark, her phone buzzed once, a message from Emily. I'll earn it back, Mom. I promise. Claire stared at the glow of the screen for a long time before turning it face down. Promises were words. Actions would be the proof. And the next morning, everything began to shift. 2 weeks had passed since Emily showed up at Claire's apartment. They hadn't spoken much since that morning. There had been a few short messages, mostly from Emily, things like thinking of you or can we have lunch soon. But Claire kept her responses polite and short. Not cold, but careful. She wasn't ready to open the door too wide again. The bakery, on the other hand, was alive with change. Sophie was already stepping into her new role with quiet confidence. She had taken over the ordering, negotiated better delivery rates with the dairy supplier, and even introduced a small breakfast menu that had customers lingering longer. Claire found herself watching from the sidelines more often now. She still came in most days, but she let Sophie take the lead. It was a strange feeling, both freeing and bittersweet, to see her life's work slowly shifting into someone else's hands. One Wednesday afternoon, as Claire was wiping down the front counter, the bell over the door rang. Emily walked in alone, her coat buttoned to the neck. She held a paper bag in one hand and a folder in the other. Hi, she said, her voice soft. Hi, Claire replied, nodding toward a corner table. Sit. I'll bring you tea. When Claire set the cup in front of her, Emily pushed the paper bag across the table. I stopped by your favorite deli. The turkey on rye, no mustard. You used to get it every Friday when I was little. Claire raised an eyebrow but took the bag. That's thoughtful. Thank you. Emily took a breath, then opened the folder. Inside were printed pages, her resume, her pay stubs, and what looked like a typed budget. I've been going through our finances, Emily began. Mine and Daniel's. And, Mom, I didn't realize how much we were leaning on his parents for the wedding. Or how much control they've been taking because of it. Every suggestion comes with a condition. Who's on the guest list, what the vows should sound like, even where we live after. Claire listened without interrupting. Emily's eyes shimmered with something that looked like shame. I told them we're scaling back. No $300 plate menu. No imported flowers. Just something small, something we can pay for ourselves. Daniel's not thrilled, but, she hesitated, then continued. If I'm going to rebuild with you, I can't let them keep treating me like I'm part of a deal. Claire sipped her tea. And what does Daniel think about rebuilding with me? Emily's jaw tightened. He says it's not necessary. That I should focus on our future, not the past. But I told him you're not the past, you're my mother. If he can't understand that then, she stopped, blinking hard. Then maybe we need to think about what kind of future we actually want. It was the first time Claire had heard her daughter speak like that, not as Daniel's fiancée, but as her own person. 3 days later, Claire was at the bakery when a black sedan pulled up outside. Daniel stepped out, dressed sharply in a navy suit despite it being Saturday. He walked in with that same controlled smile Claire remembered from the engagement party. Claire, he said smoothly, we need to talk. Sophie glanced at Claire from behind the counter, her posture stiffening. Claire gestured toward an empty table. We can talk here. Daniel sat, leaning forward. I'm concerned about the tension between you and Emily. She's been distracted. The wedding plans are falling apart, and she's questioning things she never used to. Maybe that's not a bad thing, Claire said evenly. Daniel's smile faltered. Look, I understand you're upset about what happened at the party. But involving yourself in our private life, changing your will, that's not fair to Emily. Claire's eyes were calm, but her voice sharpened just enough. Daniel, what's not fair is asking my daughter to cut me off to fit into your family's picture. I'm not a charity you can close down when it's inconvenient. For the first time, Daniel looked unsettled. I'm just trying to protect her. Claire leaned back. From what? From having a mother who worked for everything she owns? From understanding that love comes with respect, not conditions. The silence stretched until Sophie approached with 2 cups of coffee. She set them down without a word and walked back to the counter, her presence like a silent wall behind Claire. Daniel cleared his throat and stood. I hope you think about what's best for her. I am, Claire said, her gaze steady. That's why I've made the decisions I have. He left without finishing his coffee. A week later, Emily returned, this time with no coat, no folder, no pre-planned speech. She came in during the afternoon lull, when the bakery smelled of fresh cinnamon rolls, and the light through the windows turned everything gold. She sat at the same table as before and looked at her mother. Daniel and we called off the wedding. Claire felt a pang, but she kept her face calm. That's a big decision. Emily nodded. He didn't want to compromise on anything. Not the guest list, not the budget, not how we'd handle money. And I realized, I've been compromising myself for months. She looked down, her voice quiet. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. Claire reached across the table and placed her hand over Emily's. Seeing it now is what matters. They sat like that for a long moment. No rush, no script, just the weight of a door finally opening between them. That evening, back at her apartment, Claire took the velvet box from the shelf. She turned it over in her hands, feeling the worn edges where the fabric had smoothed over the years. She opened it, letting the necklace catch the lamplight. When Emily knocked on her door the next morning, Claire handed it to her without a word. Emily's eyes filled instantly. Mom, I don't deserve this yet. Maybe not, Claire said softly. But it was never about deserving. It's about remembering where you come from, and not letting anyone make you forget it. Emily clutched the box to her chest. I won't forget again. Months later, the bakery's front window bore a new sign. Sophie's Bake Shop, established 2024. On opening day under the new name, Claire stood quietly in the corner, watching Sophie greet customers like she'd been doing it her whole life. Emily was there too, helping pour coffee, her hair tied back, laughter returning to her face. The will hadn't changed. Sophie still owned the bakery. Emily understood that now, not as punishment, but as a line drawn in history. Trust would rebuild slowly, thread by thread, in actions rather than promises. And for the first time in a long time, Claire felt something settle in her chest. Not victory, not revenge, but peace. Because she had kept her dignity. Because Emily had found her way back without being pulled. And because the life she had built was still hers to protect on her terms.